Why is it a big deal for Moon that he's got friends?
Because he's never had them.
Yeah, like who's he lived with his whole life?
His dad.
Pops.
His dad. That's about it. I mean, he did live with his mom, but does he even remember much about his mom?
No.
No.
All he remembers of his mom is someone else laying on the other side of him and keeping him alone.
Yeah, because he was probably like, I think he was about 2 when she passed away. Dee, could you close your computer and turn the front lights on for me, please? Chris, close your computer, please. If you guys would like to work on that stuff when we go outside here in a little bit, that's when you can bring your computer with you and work on it then.
Okay.
Dee, I need close the computer. I need my lights on, sir, please.
Lights.
Thank you.
Stop watching Minecraft. We can see your computer.
Thank you, sir. All right.
Minecraft sucks.
Chapter 12 is where we left off. Moon ends up at the boys' home. It's called the Pinson Boys' Home or Pinson Home for Boys or something like that. And this big kid, his name's Hal. Hal looks at him. He's like, "You don't look so tough to me." And he goes to grab Moon. Or Moon's like, "Well, I could whip you." And Hal goes to grab Moon and grab him by his ankles. And as he's trying to grab him, Moon's like dancing around on his bed. What's Moon do to Hal? Slaps him right upside the head, right across the face. He's got a big red handprint now. And Mr. Carter, this big, giant black man who's kind of like in charge of the kids here, he actually like lifts Hal and drags him and tells him he's got to sleep outside for the night.
Imagine
Think about
you
that.
have to sleep outside with coyotes.
Sleep outside.
You could wait till I've done it. You could get bugged by swallow. I slept on the porch with me and my friends. We brought the PlayStation outside and the TV, and we slept on the porch in Pennsylvania.
Huh. Sounds like a good time. Chapter 12. To get to Mr. Jean's office, Mr. Carter had to unlock the steel door again. After we passed through, he locked it back and motioned for me to keep moving. I followed behind him and tried to match my steps with his until he stopped and turned and stared at me. "Now, don't you be making trouble," he said. "I bet you can run pretty fast." "You bet I can." We started walking again, and he went slower, and I got up beside him. "Why'd you send Hal outside?" "Well, because he's mean to you and everybody else." "What's wrong with him?" "He got a bad attitude. He's been like that ever since he got here." "Well, why don't you send me outside? I'll stay under a tree, and everybody else can stay in here." "Well, it's going to be chilly tonight." "Cold doesn't bother me. All you need is a blanket and a fire." "Ain't going to be no fires around here now. No matches allowed." "I don't need matches. I can rub sticks and make fire." Mr. Carter didn't answer, but started shaking his head. Soon we came to a door, and Mr. Carter knocked on it. Mr. Jean's office had thick carpet and a big desk with 2 chairs in front of it. He was pouring himself a glass of water when we walked in. His face was drawn like he was worried a lot and didn't get much sleep. What happened the last time Moon met Mr. Jean? Do you remember that first car ride Moon took? What happened, Paxton?
He threw up in the back of his car and punched him in the crotch.
Yeah, he threw up in the back of the car, and while he's like cleaning himself off, Mr. Jean's like, "Moon, are you okay?" Moon's bent over, and Moon just gets up and hits him right between the legs. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," he said. "Moon, why don't you come take a seat in one of these chairs?" I sat down. Mr. Jean went around the other side of the desk and got in his chair and placed his drink down in front of him. I turned to see if Mr. Carter was still there, but he'd already gone. Then I started to feel sick from all the food I'd eaten. I took a deep breath and crossed my arms over my stomach. "And how was your supper?" Mr. Jean asked me. "It's good," I said. "Better than jail." I watched my stomach rise and fall because it felt bigger than usual. "Mr. Carter says Sanders roughed you up." I shrugged. "We've had trouble with him before." "I'm okay." He studied me for a moment and then took a sip of his water. "Very well. You still planning on busting out of here?" "Yes, sir." "Don't you think you'd rather be inside and warm instead of out in that cold and alone with people like Sanders?" "I'd rather be on my way to Alaska." Yes, Alaska. Mr. Wellington told me about your Alaska plans. "Yeah, there's people like me up there." "Yeah? That's why I'm busting out." "Seems you got your mind pretty much set on what it is you want." "Since that's the case, let me tell you how it's going to be." Mr. Jean sat up in his chair and he set his drink back down. His face tightened and became serious. "First of all, you're not going to bust out of this place. We've never had anyone escape from Pinson. That talk is nonsense and you may as well get it out of your head. Second of all, there's a possibility that you got relatives." Mr. Gene bent over and brought Pap's box from the floor, set it on the desk. Where'd you get that? We got all your things in a safe place for you. What about my rifle and my bullets? The police in Livingston have them. What about my wheelbarrow and my clothes? I don't know anything about a wheelbarrow and clothes. Well, then you don't have it all. Sanders threw my wheelbarrow in the swamp, and he threw my deerskin hat in the road. They took my moccasins and my jacket at the jail, said I wasn't getting back my rifle. Well, we'll look into all that. However, your friend, Mr. Abrascato, he's not my friend. Fine. Mr. Abrascato told me about these pictures. That's why he's not my friend. Mr. Gene held up his hand. Will you let me finish? I didn't answer him because my stomach suddenly started hurting bad. I took a couple more deep breaths. Mr. Abrascato said, one of these men here looks a lot like your father. Anyone turns out to be a relative of yours, then he can claim you. If not, close it, please. Close it, please. Thank you. If not, you'll remain the property of the state. If you behave yourself, we may eventually find a foster home for you. Otherwise, you'll remain here until you're 14 years of age, and then you'll be moved to Hellenweiler, our facility for older teenagers. You understand all that? My stomach hurt so much, I didn't care what he said. I nodded my head and I took another deep breath. Any more incidents like that one you had with me a couple days ago, and your stay here will not be pleasant. Do you understand? I nodded. Good. First thing you'll need to do here at Pinson is get that mess of a haircut out of your eyes. You can do that tomorrow after breakfast. Report to the back of the kitchen, and Mrs. Broomstead, the cook, will take care of it. He shoved a pile of books from the corner of his desk at me, and these will be your school books. We have school every weekday from 7:30 until 3. You'll be in trailer 2 with Miss Crutcher. You understand? Yes, sir. Very well, he said. We'll see you in the morning. I stood up and I grabbed my books. You know how to get to the rec room? I shook my head. After you put your books in your locker, go back out to the hall and take a left. It's the last room at the end of the hall. You'll see everybody in there. Yes, sir, I said. Who taught you to say yes, sir? Pap did. Taught me everything. Well, that's good, Mr. Gene said. Keep it up. Mr. Carter was waiting outside the office. He walked back with me far enough to unlock the steel door and let me through. Now, don't you cause no trouble back there, he said. I won't. On the way back to the bunk room, I noticed that all the windows had wire glass inside the glass. Every door that led out of the building had alarm signs on it. Unless there was some way to get out of the play yard, I understood why no one had ever escaped from Pinson. I heard the sound of the other boys down in the rec room, but I felt so bad that I decided to go back to my bed and lie down. When I walked into the bunk room, I heard someone tapping on the windows. I turned sideways and I saw Hal pointing at me. You're dead, I heard him say. I looked away and continued to my bunk. I put my books in a locker in locker 18, and I saw a new blue jacket hanging in there. I ran my fingers over and thought about how much I missed that deerskin one Pat made me. Gonna get my stuff back, Pat, I mumbled. I shut the locker and climbed up to my bed and slept. Why's Moon's stomach hurt so bad?
Because he ate so
been in a
much.
girl's home.
Because what?
He ate so much.
Part of it's because he's never been in this situation before. But I think a lot of it is that he actually ate way too much. Remember, he was like wolfing down all that food. And Kit, his buddy that he was sitting with, remember the kid's got bald head, wisps of hair, and he's sitting with Moon, talking to him, and Moon's just eating and eating and eating, and eventually eats so much that now his stomach hurts so bad. And a lot of it's food he's never had before too, which that can do a number on your stomach as well.
Oh yeah, and then after he did that, he also ate at the jail and he ate 2 pies.
Yeah, he's wolfing down food. My stomach had to start to feel a little better by the time the rest of the boys came back. Kit saw me on my bed and came over. Hey, why didn't you come to the rec room? My stomach hurt, I said. You ate too much. I didn't answer. Hal came and talked to us through the window, Kit said. He said he's going to tear into you as soon as he gets a chance. Hal came and talked to us through the window, Kit said. He said he's going to tear into you as soon as he gets a chance. I'm not scared of him. You ought to be. He's the toughest one in here. He's almost 14. They're going to send him to Hellenweiler in a couple weeks. One time, he hit a guy in the gut so hard that he threw up. Pep says I could whip anybody 3 times my size. That's a good thing. I know. I've been learning that. Some other boys walked over and stood behind Kit. They all watched me. One tall boy with red hair and freckles said my name. What? I said. What's it like to be famous? I don't know. They got you all over the TV. We watched it in the rec room. They said you beat up a constable. I didn't beat him up good enough. He still got me. Threw my wheelbarrow in a swamp. Threw my hat in the road. Took my rifle and all my living stuff. Did you really live in a cave? Another boy asked me. Nah, it's a shelter that's built low to the ground. What'd you eat out there? Coons and deer, stuff we grew. Things that came out of the forest. Did you have to go to school? I shook my head. Nah, Pop got me some books. I learned with them. Can you read? Yeah. And you write? Yeah, Morse code too. They gonna take you to jail or are you staying here? I'm gonna bust out as soon as I find a way. You can't bust out of here, Kit said. I can get out of most anything. Pap used to trap me like I was a coon and snare me 20 feet high up in a magnolia tree. I'd be up that rope and down that tree before he could go touch the shelter and get back. Must have been fun living out there. Better than being in here like a penned up bird dog. Hal's gonna kill you, another boy said. Yeah, Kid already told me about it. Suddenly we heard Mr. Carter standing at the entrance to the bunk room and hammering on the wall with his club. Lights out, everybody. Get in your bunks. Some of the boys mumbled complaints as they made their way back to their beds. I looked over at the window and Hal was still there staring at me. I turned my head and I went to sleep.
He's probably gonna beat up Hal next.
Why do you think Moon's not afraid of Hal? Moon's like this little tiny squirrely little dude, and Hal's this big 14-year-old that like beats everybody up. So why is Moon not scared? All the other kids seem to be worried about him. Why is Moon not afraid of him? Go ahead.
Because he already beat up 2 grown men.
He already beat up 2 grown men.
He has more skills than he will ever know.
Yeah, I think that's right. He's got more skills, better ability maybe to fight. Hal, Moon doesn't seem to be scared of anything, does he? I mean, living on his own as a kid.
Except when he heard that thing running in the forest. When he felt the stairwell.
Absolutely, great connection. Good memory. When he's by himself, I would say that's the time that he was afraid, was when he was by himself. And
It was like a day after his pop died.
yeah, and that was right after he had buried his dad. Yep. Good memory, Wyatt.
Mr. Houston, back then, did you have to bury your parents if they died?
No. I mean, a long time ago, maybe in like the 1800s and stuff. But that's not something you do now. Like, that's not something kids would do today. Yeah, you would typically put them in a real graveyard, for sure. Yeah.
Back then, they didn't have a grave, so they would use sticks as a cross.
They might. Sticks, wood. You could use rocks as like a grave marker way back in the day. This isn't that long ago, though. This is like the 1980s, so it's a while back, but common time, I guess you would
I
say.
know how to spot out Indian grave burials. They put big piles of like bricks and rocks over them.
They might. All right, we're going to stop there for today, folks.